So I think we can start now. Can I start explanation or from now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. 皆様、改めまして SYUK オンラインウェビナーにご参加いただきありがとうございます。本日はマンダーポートバンドウッドワードからジャミルさんをお招きしまして、国連や国際機関で働くまでの道のりについて英語でお話しいただきます。今回のセミナーにつきましては、冒頭で私が今こちらの説明を挟んでいるんですけれども、ほとんど講義形式でジャミルさんの方からお話しいただくような形になります。英語での説明になっていきますので、よろしければお手元にメモなどご用意ください。また、こちらで一つ皆様にお願いがあるんですけれども、ご登録いただいた時のお名前を表示していただけますでしょうか。もしお名前を表示することが難しい場合は、チャットで直接私まで、香り菊池という、SYUK と入っている私の方までチャットでお名前をご申告いただけますと幸いです。それではここからウェビナーを開始していただきます。Okay, Mr. Jamil, thank you so much for waiting. I finished my explanation, so please start your lecture from now.
Okay. Good morning UK time here, and good evening to everyone over there in the Far East. Yeah, my name is Jamil A Rashid. I work for MPW Cambridge, and basically I teach mainly the A levels, and I also do examining work for the exam board, politics, philosophy, history, and international relations or global politics is what I have taught in the past 10 years or so since I left the British civil service. I've got quite a few things to share with you. Obviously, we will take questions and answers whenever Kaori lets me do that. And obviously, I would like to do that because to make it more interactive. But I was given the task to look at a question saying your route to the United Nations and other international organizations. So I'm just going to go through. I'm just going to go through the sort of handout of my sort of research notes, which I wrote first, okay, with you. And then if you've got questions, or you can put them in the chat, or Kaori can let you in. And then after that, I'll share all the sort of things that I've got on my screen there, PDFs, as well as sort of websites on how to keep up to date with international relations, basically your way into the United Nations. Okay, so here we go. Let me just get I did not do a PowerPoint, but just wrote some notes accordingly. So if that was the question which was given to me, I think the key points basically come down to two bullet points. International organizations, wherever they might be in your country or any other country, they have to look at the policies of that particular country. And they do that through data analysis, policies, and where they will actually get their funding from. So that's the first sort of point just to bear in mind. And then if you are actually researching into international relations, etc., you need to be more, the words I found were accessible and receptive to whatever's happening on the local, national sort of level before you actually go to the world level. And if you do then tick those two bullet points, those two boxes, you can then need to make a view about why you would actually want to join the UN or other international organizations. I mean, I've known people in the past who worked for the EU, which is a regional sort of institution, but it's the same sort of level like the United Nations. And I've basically come up with, they're not necessarily in any descending order, but they are to do with international peace and security. That's one of the main aims of the United Nations. Protecting human rights. Obviously, I'll say about more of those sort of things as we go through it, and especially in the stuff which is happening around the world as we speak, delivering that aid and upholding international law. And also they would actually try to do things like sustainable development, especially regards to world poverty or hunger and stuff like that. Okay, so my sort of view in that bit is it's no surprise that many young people, yourselves included, who want to do a career in, say, sustainability, will need to get hired by the UN. But I always temper this sort of dream with and reconcile this dream with the real world which is happening out there. And it's the world that is before you, and then obviously what you would like to create. And this is me just putting down the sort of stuff about what's happening now with the Middle East through the Israel, Gaza and Hamas situation, shall we say, the stuff that's been happening for the last year or so between Ukraine and Russia, let alone all the natural human disasters that we've seen, like famine, global warming, fires, floods, earthquakes, tsunamis, and even just the world coming out of the pandemic. All of these things have to be taken into account when you're actually sort of looking at joining these sort of worldwide international institutions. And I've also put down that diplomacy teams, so basically working for the government in diplomatic circles, the stuff that I used to do before I started teaching, as well as the role of what's called non-governmental organizations, the big charities, the big sort of other organizations who also move you into the international organizations. I hope that bit makes sense, yeah? And then I thought, what would be my sort of tips for you people who are out there, undergraduates, postgraduates even, how you could actually get a job, so to speak, in the UN. And again, these are not in any descending order. The first and foremost point, I think, is, especially in the world that we're living in now, which is a global village, if you want to call it that you've got to be having shown some sort of experience of how you work in the field. And the United Nations, obviously, they prioritize people who have had this hands-on experience working in whichever projects. So again, I have had people in the past who've been sort of like working in the Amazon rainforest with the Brazilian sort of authorities, building roads, stuff like that, et cetera, on that sort of level. They can then show that these are the examples that they've actually worked in the field if they then wanted to proceed into United Nations. So if you have people taking gap years or anything like that, students like that, whatever, and it shows them your commitment and passion to humanitarian work, but it also shows them that you are the person who can handle this sort of stuff in a new and foreign culture, because I think that's the real important point to be made in that bit. Because if you can't handle that sort of thing, how will you be able to handle that sort of pressure or stress at the international level, even in diplomacy circles? So yeah, I think that's a crucial point there, that you've got to be used to working in the field where there are basically foreign cultures to yourselves, okay? And I go on to say, obviously, they will see that ability, whatever. And so when you do actually go through a interview process, they can test you on these sort of things about how good you were, what you actually did, what did it show you about your leadership skills or whatever, or how your interpersonal skills with the local communities that you were actually helping with, and how you made those decisions, okay? While it's tough, obviously, to do that sort of thing, and while you're studying, I know you can't get that sort of thing, but you could still do that on a local level, say in Japan, if you wanted to. Even if you're doing a master's degree, you might need to take a semester out and then do that sort of thing. And again, not just having a gap year, but maybe even having a semester break, and where you can actually go to another country and get those links developed to do whatever the research is that you wanted to do that. But field work, practical field work, I think it will actually maximize your learning overall, as well as your way in. And I think, sorry to go back to the top, I think experience working in the field does actually tick those boxes that if you want to get through that process, it will be in there. Then your resume, I think, or your CV, whatever you want to call it, does actually include that you don't just have an undergraduate or a graduate sort of degree, but a postgraduate or a master's degree, because again, it will put you above somebody else. So again, a lot of people who actually get into international organizations don't just have a BA or a BSc, they have an MA or even an MBA, for instance. Okay, and then they work into consultancies or those non-governmental organizations as another way of getting into the UN. Okay, so that would be really good. But my word there is definitely it has to be relevant and related. Okay, you can't be just, I'm just making it up at the moment, you've got a master's degree in music or whatever. Okay, it's got to be something sort of relevant to show that. Unless you can show that as a music master's degree, how that will be relevant to the work that you've done, maybe helping deaf children in Romania or somewhere, and that's how music helped, whatever, etc. And you've done that work. That way you'll do it, but it has to be relevant and related in order to get into those positions. So what I call a valuable, pertinent field would be really good. And if you can look at that you're actually working towards international governments and skills and insights, that will help you for that role. And again, this is just me from sort of people who I've known that they've done the best degrees. They're doing not just humanitarian work, but they were doing things like environmentally, ecologically based programs, okay? They were doing other intercultural communication or global development economic programs in their master's degrees. So all of these ones, and especially international relations, is the big one in master's degree. And that's my sort of field, if you want to call it that, or speciality, that if you've got something to do with IR or global politics, again, it will tick that box that you've actually got a relevant degree in here. Okay, but it's not to put you off other degrees or anything like that as well. And this is a new field coming up about sustainability projects like that, the environment, the ecology, etc. Those people will definitely be able to, or that sort of field should definitely open up your thing for that, for these international relations, international organizations, I should say. The third one is you do need a good, strong network, is the last one, I suppose you could say. And that is where your professors, your teachers, your other people you've met with, you've sort of like interacted with, because they can actually help you where you need that help. So that network of professional and personal contacts, this bit, yeah, I think again is key. If you've got a strong, that sort of network, and you should be starting to develop that from the get-go if possible, if not, starting from now. And they can then advise you accordingly of where you want to go to, etc., what right lectures you have to, and what other events you can go to, where you can mingle with these people, etc., because that always is another way of getting into that sort of thing, okay? But the right people, you do then vouch for your integrity and professionalism and your respect for diversity. Again, these three hiring pillars of the UN, if you can tick those three sort of boxes, again, it will help them to actually say, this academic mentor, whoever it might be, your professor, saying this about you, great. That's the person we want to have a look at, or we want to ask whether he can help volunteer, or he or she can help on a voluntary basis, etc., etc. Okay? And so my sort of like summing up, if you wanted to put it that way, would be this is what they're definitely looking for: people who've got passion for humanitarian stuff, okay, work, respect for others, sort of people and other cultures, and they just want to commit to a lifelong growth in that sort of thing, and they can work in creative ways. And that's also interesting because that's where you young people do come in, rather than somebody who's quite old myself now, that you can come up with these creative and independent ways of thinking, differing ways of thinking, where you can actually help them develop. Okay, and that's the last bit I wanted to say there. So if you fit this description and you want to get into these sort of fields and build up your degree and your references, you can actually get to hopefully this sort of thing. I think that's the bit, because I've gone into about 10 to 15 minutes of this. I have got some more details to come from here, because obviously you can see this is only page 4 of 6, but I just wanted to leave that as it is at this moment in time. Now, does that make sense thus far? Did you want me to continue, Kyra?
Yes, it was perfect. Thank you so much. Please carry into the next section.
Okay, all right, thank you. Right, the next section, as I was saying earlier in my bit, was that if you do want to keep up to date, and this is how I try to keep up to date as a teacher, as somebody who examines for international relations and global politics, just going to hopefully share this screen with you. Let's make it a bit more smaller so you can actually see where it's coming from. And this is just free. Everybody can get in there. That's the actual international relations. And why I like this, because it is quite neutral, it is quite objective, and the thing is, it keeps up to date. And so things like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, the new stuff which is happening, again, as of yesterday, there's an article by this Amelia, etc., on this book which was being published, etc. There's a global podcast a couple of days ago about again, I think this is from the Russian-Ukraine sort of issue, the war, etc. And the podcast, again, this is a way of all you guys sort of keeping up to date. The textbooks, which I have got, and I use these in my sort of teaching, so they're quite good. And obviously I can share them. Again, there's some of the PDFs on my desktop, is that one and that one, for instance. Okay. And again, other things in here. And obviously they do advertisements as well for people wanting to do BA honours in politics and international relations in Bristol University, etc., here in the UK. Okay, and yeah, and I would say that this isn't the only one. There's lots of other ones out there. You can find your own ones. Again, your professors or your teachers might know these ones, but I do like that one. And so, you know, they do actually have articles which you can read about the whole thing which is happening in the Middle East, for instance. What's the sort of thing about China's role within that as we speak, because we don't hear about that. We hear about the British or the Americans, and we might hear about the Iranians and maybe the Russians in this Israel Gaza problem. But what is the Chinese sort of issue, whatever they're trying to mediate on? And so that way you can actually see an international sort of thing about that. So again, if you click that, you get the articles about that. So yeah, and somewhere nearer to you, which I did not know about, but I think I've got one of my students who is from Cambodia, for instance, talking about the actual sort of leadership in Cambodia. And again, articles about that, as well as, you know, what happened in the dark history, shall we say, of Cambodia in the recent past and what's happening now. So again, another way of keeping up with international relations. And then obviously you young people are always on X or tweets or whatever. These tweets are all on here. So you can always just keep up to date with other people, other students, other academics, etc., etc. Okay, and more podcasts. She's quite good, Megan McKenzie, etc., talking about basically the role of the military in international relations and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely a good sort of website that I always just have on my sort of computer whenever I wanted to have a look at, and then I can go into them in depth. Okay, so that would be another way of you guys, you know, hopefully doing this sort of thing. Does that make sense thus far, Kaori? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll continue. Right, and then back in my teaching, again, there's some of these PDFs which are on here, is basically because I teach at the A-level stage, global politics and international relations, I still get what I call handouts or textbooks or whatever. And then again, I share that with my students that they can actually then use these resources to help develop their thinking and answer questions for exams, obviously. So for instance, let's just bring the one about the United Nations up. I might have to increase the screen on here. And again, we have a debate about whether the United Nations is fit or unfit for its purpose. And then there will be arguments on one side saying, yes, it's outdated, whatever, etc., etc. They'll have their conclusions. And then the other side of the debate, so these are from academics or teachers, this Josie Gadsby, and then the opposite saying, no, they're okay. They do work on action on poverty, on climate change. It's a good forum, etc., etc. And that helps students to sort of like see both sides of the argument, because there is always 2 or 3 sides even to any of these arguments, and then trying to come to their own viewpoint about what they might think about the United Nations. So yes, I use a lot of these resources in my sort of teaching capacity, and it's okay, maybe geared to A-level students, but for somebody starting out for international relations or whatever, or even a degree or postgraduate sort of stuff, you can still use these debates or arguments from this one. So I just showed you that about the UN. What's about NATO? Because obviously something closer to this part of the world anyway, where it's, excuse me. So just on an introduction about NATO, yeah, what is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Where did it come from? What happened? What did it do? How did it evolve? What is the future? So if people have got a military background possibly, or other backgrounds like that, this is another way if you wanted to join these organizations on an international level, what they did. So here they are, who are the members, when did it start, etc., etc. And obviously this is key to the stuff which is probably happening in Ukraine and Russia, because that was the sort of issue that the Russians were saying, that Ukrainians were sort of trying to join NATO, etc., etc. And that's what sort of sparked the war. So again, who is this NATO? What do they do? What do they believe in? So again, I've got articles to show that sort of thing. So I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but if you want me to stop, whatever. But then there's also a philosophy type of arguments to do with international relations, whether you are a realist, a realpolitik person about the world that it is, or a liberal in the way that you actually want to change the world. And again, I'll get these sort of debates or arguments, because we actually have to use what we call comparative theories in global politics. And these are the 2 big ones. And we're just looking at COVID-19 and the pandemic and what happened to international relations around that, and whether one view is that the glass is half empty, which is sort of like the realist view about how you tackle that sort of thing when COVID happened. And the other view would be this sort of like more liberal version of that. Excuse me, don't know why it's not trawling down. Oh, it's only 1 page. Okay, sorry, I have to sort of decrease its size. That's why you can see the other. Oh, here we go. So you trawl across the other side, excuse me. There, to see the sort of liberal view. And again, there's quite a bit of what is the difference between, say, realism and liberalism. And basically what I teach with my students is how they would answer a question using that sort of plan. And we use people like Fukuyama and his sort of like original 1990s famous book, which he got famous on, The End of History and the End of the Last Man, and research what he actually meant at that sort of time and what is he thinking about now, because he's obviously still researching and developing books out there, and has he actually changed his view? And we used even the old stuff from the old days, you know, Thucydides' trap, etc., and then talk about how China is involved in the stuff which is happening in your part of the world, shall we say. Okay, and then what happened with these theories. So again, there's a philosophical element within international relations, etc., etc. And again, I would say this is another way you can, people who are interested in PPE, shall we say, or these sort of subjects, whether the philosophy side would actually help you and still get a master's degree in philosophy or whatever, or international relations. And again, you can then develop your route into diplomacy circles and stuff like that. So that's 3 sort of handouts. The textbook, which I did show you earlier from the website, again, always got the PDF versions of the textbook, international relations, again, using lots of bits from that. I mean, obviously, I'm going to go through the whole textbook, but yeah, that's one of the ones. Stephen McGlinchey, 237 pages. Is there another one? Yeah, the Andrew Hayward one. This is, I'll show you the front cover, Global Politics, our go-to textbook about that. And again, excellent introductions and whatever. You have to keep up to date. That's the only thing. So even when these books are written, things just like with politics or anything else, it's a fluid subject. It's not like history. And you just have to keep up to date with those sort of like examples of websites that gave you, but it still gives you the introduction to global politics. What is it, etc., etc. How is it international relations, etc., the great debates, stuff like that. So again, the textbook that I've been using for the last few years in my teaching, the Andrew Hayward global one as well. So they're the sort of 2 textbooks. That's sort of like a little chapter if people want, they're starting out with international relations. Again, Stephen McGlinchey, what is the foundation of international relations? And basically we go through a chapter looking at sort of like the war, the history, how this sort of things change with the United Nations, etc., etc. And then right at the end, we have some questions which then students sort of cover by doing the reading and then answering those sort of questions about that. If I can just make this a bit bigger for you, you could probably see, because again, sorry, I rushed through it. So in what ways has warfare been central to international relations from its inception as a discipline? So they look at warfare and sort of like things like that. I mean, when I was studying many years ago, it used to be called war studies or conflict resolution studies, whatever, but in effect, it's all become international relations. What was the Westphalian system and why was it important? That's a sort of historical thing about when Europe first sort of came about and how the lines were drawn, etc., between the different nation states. So the whole thing about nationalism and nation states and how they then formed to make this international community. What type of polarity do you think best represents today's global system? And then again, there is lots of differing answers to that. Is it a unipolar world where the Americans are at the top and everybody else underneath? Or is it a bipolar world where maybe it's the Americans, maybe the Russians, maybe the Chinese in that bi thing? Or is it a tripolar thing? Now you're actually saying it's the Americans as well as the Chinese, as well as the Russians or whatever. Or is it just multipolar because now you've got the BRICS and the MINTs and all these other ones, Brazil, Russia, India, China, etc. And so what type of world are we living in, etc. And again, that's a good sort of way into the subject, knowing the history and the theory behind international relations, because I try to put everything together because it is a mixture. It is politics, it is history, it is philosophy, but put that together in the modern world as we speak now. Okay, and then obviously there was questions about how we coming out pandemics. I mean, that's also never used to feature before, but since COVID, now the World Health Organization and everything like that is another organization. So budding doctors out there might be that you could actually then work with the World Health Organization and get another international institution, and you can actually help out on that front. So you don't just have to do your MBBS and become a doctor after 7 years, and which is a good profession, obviously. But then if you wanted to take that further on the international stage, this is how you would then do that. Okay, what else have I got just to sort of show you? Is that another? Yeah, it's another little articles and stuff like that. So another way of keeping up to date is academics, whatever, they write their own journals and stuff like that. So again, you can, this is where you might help for networking purposes, find out who these people are. So what do they talk about? The modern state. So Journal of Global Fault Lines. So this is a journal and an article from that by this guy, Darrell Whitman. Again, it's got the key words in there if you're doing that sort of research, and then talks about the US and their sort of, shall we say, their history, how they became this hegemonic power, if you want to call it that, links it back to the Federalist Project back in the day by the Founding Fathers, etc., etc. So again, if somebody's got an interest in sort of American studies or whatever, etc., another way into, you know, looking at the Americans. And again, my student, he won't, hopefully won't mind me saying that, but he's sort of like half Japanese, half American, and he's got that shared heritage so that he can actually see, you know, both sides of the coin, as it were, to do with peace studies, if you want to say that, after the Second World War, what happened, but also about the American sort of expansionist project, etc. So again, yeah, I've got loads of these sort of things in here. So this is what you guys definitely have to do. Shall I just leave the last one? It's 11:30. So is this one the whole thing about American or Americanism, if you want to call it that? 2 pages of it. Okay, I haven't got the first bit, but it's like, to what extent, and should I make that a bit bigger so you can see, use your outline, to what extent do the emerging powers, whoever they might be, China, Russia, India, Brazil, whatever, pose a threat to US hegemony? And again, you look through the US history of its military power, its political power, its economic power, and especially in the 20th century, and how you write an answer to that effect using this article by one of my sort of colleagues who writes for these magazines, Josie Gadsby, and she teaches at one of the other colleges. So lots of us teachers do this sort of contribution to these sort of magazines and updates and articles to help students who are doing international relations or global politics to actually answer these sort of types of questions. Okay, is that all right, Kaori, or did you still want me to continue?
Thank you so much for a very beneficial lecture for everyone. And
thank you.
I think it's very, very academic. So maybe some students would like to have a break in here, if you don't mind, because we
yeah, that's fine.
Some questions.
Or any questions or anything?
Thank
yes.
You. It was very also interested for me. It's
okay,
very,
that's
yes,
good.
it's an academic. Thank you so much. Okay, so can I, may I read the questions from the chat? Maybe
of course you can. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm sorry, one moment, please.
That's okay. I'll make my little notes
Thank
as
you.
you go through the questions then.
皆様、ここまでウェビナーをご清聴いただきありがとうございます。 とてもアカデミックな内容で、いろんな資料を使ってご説明いただいておりましたので、ここで一回、情報整理する時間と、質疑応答の時間を設けたいと思います。チャットの方に今、ご質問、ご投稿いただいているところから順番に、読みたいと思うんですけれども、今結構聞くのに精一杯だったところもあると思うので、何かご質問があれば、チャットの方でご投稿お願いします。英語の方が伝わりやすいんですけれども、全然日本語でも大丈夫です。Okay, thank you so much for waiting, Mr. Jamil. So I'll read the
Yes.
first question.
Sure.
Okay. Some MA course, some master course related to
Yes.
international development.
Yes.
Students opportunities to join fieldwork to complete their
Yes.
thesis.
Yes.
Do you think students need fieldwork or volunteer experience to work at United Nations?
I think the answer to that is whatever work they've done, whether it's in the field or in voluntary stuff, it's always going to be helpful than not doing anything at all.
Okay, I
So
see.
my answer would be to that person, please, yes, if you're doing voluntary stuff, good. If you wanted to do some more field work, also good. Better to do something to show on your CV or your resume that you have done these things. That will put you at a higher level of advantage than somebody who's just done the academic research and not done any of that. That's all. Okay. You still will be interviewed, and then it's how you do the interview. But yes, please keep this going and build up your network of references and contacts. That's the other thing on top of that to that person.
Okay, that's
All
very
right.
important.
That's good.
Thank you.
Nice question.
By the way, may I add one question in here related
Sure.
to the fieldwork or volunteering?
Yeah.
What kind of volunteer or fieldwork do you recommend if they really want to work in United Nations?
Okay. It depends on what they're actually the subject they're doing, but I will just give an example. For instance, somebody's doing geography as a master's thing. There is a lot of geopolitics within geography, and they do have to do sustainability projects, if you want to say, for want of a better word. So somebody might take a semester out, or maybe even a gap year out, as part of their research, if you want to call it that, and they'll go to, I mean, I'm just making this off the top of my head, looking at La Paz in Bolivia, about how they do the transportation systems in a country like that. And so if they then have got that, they put that in their CV, obviously with their resume, as well as their master's work that they're doing in geography, but will also build up those contacts. So then they could go on to working on the development side of the United Nations, looking at transportation, because they've been to La Paz in Bolivia, and they've seen how the network of those trains and whatever, that sort of thing happened. So, and these are not examples that I've made up. These are people or students that I've known who've done these sort of things.
Oh, I see.
Yes. So I knew this person. He just was doing a geography master's. I did not know much about geography, but I knew about geopolitics. And he went through Latin America and South America, and especially he was really interested in the transportation systems about developing countries for whatever. Yeah, and Bolivia is not really, a major country, but their transport system, because it's so high on those mountains, everything is done by cable car. And again, use that sort of field experience, volunteering work, whatever, not just for his degree, but then how he could then go into the United Nations. So brilliant question. Love that sort of question. That's the type of questions I like answering.
Yes, we get lots of similar questions, and we always wonder what is the best way for them.
Yeah.
Of course, it's
and that's just you asking me, which is good, because that's why I thought I'd like to be here, because I could share the experiences of the students I've had over the last 10 years or so.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, so maybe we can carry on to the next question.
Yes, please.
It's also related to the United Nations. I would like to know what drove you to work for the United Nations.
Okay, right. Okay, I did not actually get into the United Nations myself, just to make that clear. It's when I was doing my degree a long time ago, and I'd finished it, and it was like politics and government at that time, my undergraduate degree. And basically, this is in London, one of the London sort of universities. I did not know anywhere else what sort of job I wanted to. I had no field worker experience, but then I just sort of like done a graduate entry scheme to the British Civil Service. And that's where it started with my fellow students who I came in touch with over it was like 30 years. So yes, I worked in different departments, everything like that. And the people and the contacts that I made who worked in the Foreign Office, shall we say, that worked in the United Nations and all of that, that's how I developed those sort of things. But I never actually took that step myself. I was just happy working in London, etc., living in London and meeting these people in government circles, in civil service circles, whatever. But that actually gave me that sort of point that when I did leave the civil service, sort of like 2011, after 30 years, so I was there from 1981 to 2011, that they were good for me because they actually helped me during that time to do my master's, stuff like that, took time off, etc., etc. Then I just wanted to actually teach because I was doing that sort of thing with new graduates who are coming through, putting them into contact with, if they wanted to work in the Foreign Office, for instance, or the Home Office, or whatever, the Defense Department, etc., etc., and having those sort of, shall I say, contacts or skills, whatever. I just wanted to take that to students outside of the civil service. And that's when I left. That's when I then decided to say, yes, I want to do teaching, but I want to do teaching on these subjects, but I definitely want to help students who then want to do these sort of things and carry that forward. And that's what I've been doing. Thankfully, MPW have given me that chance for the last 10 years or so. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So did that help? Did that answer that question?
Yes, of course. So it
Sure.
was kind of, you didn't plan to
No, definitely didn't plan. But I can see what the world is like, and the people are planning, and I think that's a good thing. All they need is somebody to sort of like, I'm just a guide or a helper to sort of, they still have to do everything else, but I'm just here to help them and advise them.
I see. By the way, I think, but you work closely with United Nations or any other related society
organizations, yeah, because so for instance, because again, I had friends who were, shall we say, more intelligent than me, and they actually got headhunted. That's the word the civil service used. And they said, I think one of my friends who I worked with right at the beginning when I first started the civil service, she actually got headhunted by, I think it was the Prime Minister's office in the UK. Yeah. And I think it was Tony Blair at that time, and she was then in there, but obviously they're prone to sort of secrecy. They can't tell you the things which are happening in there more so than whatever. But she did let slip sometimes that how it is working for a high-powered position as working for the Prime Minister of the time, Tony Blair, and what was actually happening, especially around that time when the Iraq War was happening in the UK. So interesting things that you actually do get to meet people or know people who have worked in those sort of high-powered positions, if you want to call it that.
I see. So that sounds different background, but it's all connected.
Absolutely, yes. It's different stories, different backgrounds, but they're all connected to maybe national politics, but it is international politics as well. And other people who worked in the Foreign Office, for instance, again, sort of one of my sons will also work for the civil service, but he's got sort of friends who are working in the Foreign Office, and they're always on whatever duties and tours around the world. In embassies and stuff like that, diplomatic circles. So that's what they, tell stories about, whatever, etc. Again, just an anecdotal sort of thing was one of the guys who worked on, I think he was working on the I can't remember, is it the Greek desk or the Turkish desk or something?
Okay.
And his job was anything to do with the UK when it's regarding Greece or Turkey, how they would write those policies, not to offend either the Greeks or the Turks, and especially regarding the things around, say, Cyprus or whatever. And so that just shows you somebody who's working for the Foreign Office, probably he's got a secondment in Athens or in Istanbul or Ankara or whatever, still having to sort of take care of what language they use because they do not want to offend either the Greeks or the Turks in that sort of thing about to do with Cyprus, for instance, and what is the British foreign policy interest around that. Yeah, so again, that's the sort of thing. So if people from Japan or whatever are interested in this sort of thing, you just have to do the things that I've sort of said on that sort of handout. You know, have a good master's degree, a relevant one. Definitely build up your network and contacts and stuff like that. And yes, if you've got some experience to show that, it will help.
Okay, thank you so much for your
That's all right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We received quite lots of questions now, so I'll carry into the next one. Is that okay for you?
Absolutely, keep going. Okay. Yes,
thank you.
I'm loving this.
Thank you. So the next question is, if I'm seeking for a career in the UN, so United Nations,
yeah,
do you recommend that I purchase? Do you recommend that I pursue traditional degrees like Master in Science in Economics or MA Sociology? So do you recommend to pursue the traditional degrees or something combined degrees?
I'm because I'm not a master of one subject. I always like the interdisciplinary or the cross or multidisciplinary approach. So I would say myself, for instance, I'm not very good at mathematics, never have been. I've never been that good at economics. I just about passed the module. But philosophy, politics, history, international relations, sociology, to me, they're all the same. And so I like that sort of approach. So my own personal view, yes, please make it as multi or inter or cross-disciplinary as possible, just to give you that chance, rather than just doing a minute degree. Although having said that, like I said about that guy, he was just doing geography and geopolitics, but it still managed to get into doing that sort of thing. So if you wanted to do, you know, PPE, politics, philosophy, economics, fine, it's a, you know, established degree, and especially if you wanted to do it at Oxbridge or one of the sort of elite universities, great. But the thing is, if you can show something else to say, hang on, this person's, I mean, I've had students, can't remember, an Australian student I had a couple of years ago, and she'd done politics, philosophy and law. Wow. PPL. And again, she found it at Warwick University, but then that found her the way into, because she wanted to go back to Australia and then work in their sort of like, you know, government departments in Australia. And she was from, shall we say, not white Australian, she was the Aboriginal Australians, etc. And so this is her sort of way of then, you know, doing the sort of like native sort of like heritage sort of things which Australia's been doing. Yeah.
So it sounds it's
did I answer that question? I think I did. I was just saying that's what I favor. In my time, it was just, oh, you got to do politics. Okay, I'll do politics. Oh, you got to do that. To me now, no, you just mixed up whatever, because there are crossover links between them, and that's good. Yeah. So rather than being narrow, just make it wider focus, and you can actually show your sort of things to these people that can actually think on a multi-dimensional level. Okay, so maybe it's important to build knowledge in different disciplines, but you can still do it to, you know, a good level of depth, not surface level. I see. Thank you. Yeah. I think it will help her. Thank you so much. That's all right. So maybe the next question. Yes. One moment, please. Okay. So I think we answered that question. So the next one is,
does getting into the United Nations require to graduate from the top universities? Oh, we get lots of questions about this.
The top universities, okay.
Yes.
On this one, I would say, shall we say, my MPW hat on, I would say, yes, please all go for the elite universities. They're really good, the Ivy League ones, the Oxbridge ones, etc., the Russell Group ones, etc. But the answer to the real question would be not necessarily, no, because there are people who've worked in the United Nations who have not been from Ivy League or Oxbridge ones, okay? But having them, it's not a bad thing. So if you've got the Ivy League or Oxbridge, it's a good thing. But just because if you can't get them, don't think, oh, that's it, I won't be able to work in the United Nations, because there's lots of people who work for these organizations who have not had, the elite education.
I see. So when they recruit new staff, maybe they also check the background.
No, because they do check the backgrounds and whatever, but they check on what the person's contacts are, what the person has done, and then they will take that into account. So somebody could have been at Oxford. Again, like I said, my current student who's doing or applying for PPE at Oxford, I said, that's good, but what else have you done? And he says he has done this sort of things in Hokkaido back home in Japan. Yeah. So I said, okay, that's the bit with the extra bit to show, not that you're just going and applying to Oxford and hopefully you get there, but all of these other things that you've done. He's run a website, he's done a podcast, that's the sort of thing. But somebody can do that without going to Oxford, because that's what they will look at. So you can still have a reputable degree, shall we say, from, I don't know, KCL or UCL, whatever. Okay, they might not be in that top level. Sorry, I use UCL because I've got a contact with UCL when I was doing my teacher training. But yeah, and you can still get into the UN. It's the other things on top of that that will help.
Thank you so much for your opinion.
That's all right. Yes, I hope that answered that question.
Yes, of course. It will cheer up many people, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell them to sort of cheer up. There's, nothing bad with if you don't get to the top elite universities, that's it. And then you can just give up. No, never give up.
Thank you. Okay. So shall I carry on to the next question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So what do you think is the best point of working at international organization in the UK?
In the UK? Oh, okay. Yes. That's interesting. If you're coming from the Far East, if that's what the question's asking, I think that would be a good, in fact, no, that would be an excellent move, because the culture is different.
Okay? I see.
Our culture is different, and it will give you that extra experience that somebody who hasn't come to the UK will have. So, yeah, I mean, I would again say, please come to my college, or please come to us, or whatever, etc. But that's obviously, I have to say that because I work for MPW, but I'm just saying the UK experience for somebody in the Far East is definitely different, as is somebody from the UK going to the Far East. Yeah. And again, one of the teachers I've worked with recently, I mean, he spent 10 years in Japan. Obviously, he's a fluent Japanese speaker. Back in the day when he was a newly qualified teacher, etc. So he's told me a lot of this sort of stuff about the cultural sort of things about Japan, which, from foreign eyes or my eyes in the UK, I did not know about. So yes, anything that actually helps your cultural diversity, I think that's the word I'm looking for, it's always going to be good for working in an international organization. Because if you are narrow, and there are people in this country who are narrow, they only know UK, there is nothing else, or there are people in the States who only know about Texas and they don't know anything else. Those people won't be able to succeed in international organizations. And the best way to do that, it would be to do that sort of thing. So very good question. I really like that one. So whoever it was, yes, come to the UK.
Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, actually, we still have quite lots of questions, and
That's all right.
it's long, quite long.
That's okay. I don't mind if it goes
Thank
over. Just hopefully get everything answered.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. How difficult is it to get a job which is related to the international relations, or join an internship right after postgraduates as an international student?
Good. Do that internship straight after your postdoc, and you can get the voluntary, etc., and you can get the ball moving that way. Yes, that's the way to do it.
Do you know how difficult to get to?
It would be difficult, because if you've not had the field work, the volunteer work, if you've not got the contacts or people who can then help advise you, it just becomes harder. That's all. But if you're into an internship with, I don't know, one of the big companies who lets you do this sort of thing, why not?
Okay, I see. So maybe networking is also important. And actually,
correct.
There's a continuing question.
Yes.
I reckon we need 2 or 3 working experience to be eligible for working in the UN. So I'd like to know how to build a career path after the graduation of postgrads.
Okay, so for that question is, if you've got 2 or 3, that's good. But if you've got 0, then it's not good. 1 will be enough, because you could have done it for a whole 6 months. Like I've had, again, people who've taken semesters off. So they didn't take the whole gap year, and they just done one project, like, you know, building those sort of things in the Amazon in Brazil for whatever. That is enough. You don't need to do 2 or 3 or 4, you know, because,
I see.
Yeah, like that person was asking. 0 is bad, but if you've got 1 and you've done it in some sort of depth, that should be enough to show on your CV or your resume that, hey, I did do this stuff.
That's interesting. Thank you. So maybe they should challenge anyway after they graduate, maybe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's never too late. Even if they've graduated or post-graduated, fine, then to do it then.
I see.
If they've got the time and the inclination and the money or the backing and the references and all the rest of it, then do it by all means, and just keep applying. Something will come up. You will get noticed, especially if you're working for an internship or with a non-governmental organization. You will be seen, and hopefully you will be headhunted, and then they will actually say, we recommend you go to the UN or the World Health Organization if you're a doctor or whatever.
I see. Okay, so maybe just take a chance anytime.
Absolutely. I mean, you got youth on your side, so yeah, I would definitely do that if I was your age now.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so the next question is also a bit long, but I'll read it now. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I want to ask your opinion on what do you think is the best way to get a post in the UN. You mentioned that having a field experience is more attractive to the UN, but
yes,
it's also possible to get a career within a UN agency by having an internship experience with that agency.
Correct. Yeah, they can do it that way as well. I mean, you could apply directly into the UN and do an internship. At least you'll be in there. You're starting off at the bottom, but then you can proceed that way. But all I'm just saying is, if you're a graduate or a postgraduate, and if you've got these other ones, you'll then hopefully come in a higher grade than an internship. That's all. But either way is possible. Absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, it was really it was connected, those 2 questions. I see. Okay.
Sure.
Hey, may I add one question in here? I don't know if you can answer, but do you have any idea how many interns UN usually take from?
The numbers, no, I would not have that to hand.
Okay,
but I mean, what I would suggest to the person who's asked that question is just to put into Google whatever, and etc., and use a reputable website, and they will give that. But probably that website that I shared with you, International Relations, at the beginning, if I put that in there and ask that, they would have the people who can tell you that.
Okay.
But sorry, I don't know the answer to that. But I know it's not minute. It is quite good.
Of course. Thank you so much. Okay.
That's all right.
So so this is another question. Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. My question is to you is, do you think there would be any advantage if you have working experience in a completely unrelated field when you apply to the UN? Take myself as an example. I'm currently working in tourism and eager to work for the UN in the field of human rights. But I'm also a youth representative in ASEAN and work voluntarily for advocate human rights in the religion. I plan to apply to human rights master course and international law maybe next year. Do you have an idea for her?
Yeah, excellent question. What you're doing, all of that, what you've said, ASEAN, etc., that should be able to show, helping out with tourism, your sort of linguistic skills or whatever with people in different languages. Sure, you will be a prime candidate for the UN. You can apply now with all the stuff that you've said in that question. Definitely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, so doing that sort of work is also work experience. You're actually showing that you are doing these sort of things, and especially the sort of like the cultural diversity angle around that. Yeah, they would like that. You will show that you are a diplomatic person because you're helping in the tourist industry, whatever that,
yes, actually, yes. So maybe it's how you appeal yourself, your career.
That's it. It's how you do it. Absolutely correct.
Thank you. I hope it will help her. Okay.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Keep doing what you're doing, and keep trying that. You don't need to do anything more. Just apply.
Okay. Thank you. So next one is the last question. And do you have any tips for advice on how we can seek or expand our professional networks about networking skills?
Okay. So professional networking, I mean, this is a good question. Teachers as well, we always get asked that. The best way, I would say, and again, just using my own example, so when I left the civil service, I did not know that many sort of teachers, why I was going into the teaching profession, etc., etc. And basically, from my teacher training course, I met other people who were previously doing something else, and they were doing whatever. The networking started there. And then when I started applying for jobs before I came to MPW, again, I had certain agencies, whatever, the networking started there as well. And then when I've actually got a job with other teachers, your networking starts. And then, like I said, I started doing examining work, more networks. So the more so going back to that question with that person who's doing tourism and all this other stuff, the ASEAN, that's their network of contacts already they're building up. So not just your professors or whatever. And then I want to say this in a nice way, use those people in the sense to show off yourself, as it were, but then get them to actually help you, and you help them back. It's quid pro quo. And you will notice that, I mean, basically the people I've met since the last 10 years or whatever have helped me to come to where I am now, for instance, and doing this sort of stuff. So it is a question of who you know, but the thing is, you have to then show it by not just saying, I'm not doing anything, but can you help me? But saying, no, can you help me? But I'm doing this. They're the students I like. They're the people that can say, oh, okay, I know somebody, you can then go and see this person. And that's how you develop those networks. Okay. Did that answer that question?
Yes,
I don't know.
Of course, it was perfect. Thank you so much.
All right.
So again, it's how you appeal yourself. And
absolutely. Again, yes.
A lot with your
Yeah, and all of those skills, those attributes of how you present yourself, how you speak with others, it goes a long way, even if you're not being interviewed. You don't have to be somebody else in the interview stage. You can be yourself. So yes, okay, when we started off, when you were speaking with me, I did not know you, whatever, but by this 1 hour, I think I've got to know you, Kurt, yeah? And vice versa, because what you see is what you get. This is not an act. I'm not acting and then I'm going to be a totally different person. And people see through that and they can see somebody being authentic. That's what the UN likes. They don't like somebody, oh, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and you tick that. And when they see you, they can't speak with anybody, or they don't have that humanity or rapport. And they say, well, that might not be this person then.
So of course, the communication skills will also be important.
Absolutely key.
I see. That's the best tip, I guess. Thank you so much.
All right, that's okay. I don't mind doing this sort of stuff. This is the stuff I like doing.
Okay, so I think next one is the last question.
Sure.
So I'll read it. I believe what brings us here tonight is from somehow we all speak English and we're looking forward to use our linguistic skills to explore this new field. So if our strong point is translation study, or some of them might already in interpreter, is there any chance for us to step in this hard competitive, sorry, I lost that, competitive industry, sorry, there's something on mine. It just work in foreign office or think tank. Someone like Larry, did you read that?
Sorry,
I think my connection was bad. I think yes, sorry. So I'll go back to the some part. One moment, there's something. Oh, okay. Is there any chance for us to step in this hard competitive industry, like work in foreign office or think tank? Somehow like Larry Summers from Harvard, who is president, and he's a shadow governor, such a huge accomplishment. What can keep us moving on, or what's the motivation you think we should have?
Wow. Okay. Lots of questions in there. Firstly, again, I would just say for linguistic part of that question, the UN itself in New York, I think, I can't remember, but I saw some figures. They've got equal amount of interpreters as the people who work there. So they need interpreters all the time. And whether you can then speak Japanese, Chinese, shall we say, or Mandarin or something, and English, you will get there, okay? Because they will be needing lots of you. So just by doing that, I think that's a great thing. And sadly, in this country, why we don't get that many people into the UN from the UK basis, because everybody just speaks English. They don't even speak French or German or Italian, yeah? And so we are putting ourselves at a disadvantage. Again, when I started working in the civil service all those years ago, we had a room full of, and they were mainly females, I mean, I'm just wanting to add, who were doing all the phone calls, and they had their different language skills. Men certainly didn't at that sort of point. And they're the ones who then got recruited to those other positions around the world, rather than men who could only just speak English. Yeah. So speaking 1, 2, or 3 different languages, again, ticks those boxes that you can then work in the United Nations or other organizations. They will definitely need you. And if you could definitely speak, I'm just saying, because you're from the Far East, Mandarin or Japanese, yes, Korean, definitely. They will want you there, etc. Absolutely. To me, that just makes it really sad that, you know, UK people just have English and no other languages for whatever reason, and it just makes it harder for ourselves. And again, I was talking that other example. Sorry, this is a long answer. I'll get to the other bit in a second. But the guy who went to Brazil or whatever it was, he had a Spanish background. So his English and his Spanish really helped for the South American experiences. And then when he was there, he actually began to learn Portuguese as well. So there you go. So now you got English, main one, because he's half Spanish, and then he's got the Portuguese, which is similar but different than Spanish, in there when he was doing the stuff in Brazil. So again, while you're working in the Amazon, you're actually learning. And for instance, I think he was even learning like the local sort of dialects spoken by the native people there, etc., etc. And because he was quite dark skinned, they actually thought that he was a native rather than a Spanish speaker. And so that's how he learned, because again, it's the love of the language while you're doing that. But he never actually physically done an A-level in Spanish or Portuguese or anything like that. So again, if you've got these sort of skills, absolutely use them. Yes, definitely. Right. The second part of that question, I think, was saying about motivation and stuff like that.
Yes.
I don't know. All I know is from my past, shall we say, that I've always been motivated by people who motivated me. My teachers, my sort of fellow students or whatever. And that's the sort of thing I really want to pass on to other people. So I love teaching. So I love the interaction with students, especially from a diverse community or whatever. And that's why I think MPW definitely has given me that chance, that I'm not just teaching UK students. We've got sort of 50-50, but I'm teaching all these other students. And I like the international students, i.e. not the non-UK ones as well, because they're actually helping me to develop as a teacher, even though I am 64 years old, whatever. Okay. So it's this constant sort of thing. And that is the motivation in itself. So yeah, when one of my people, Andy and Carol from the MPW offices in Hong Kong, asked me to do this, and I said, I'm busy working. This is half-term week, but I'd like to do this even though I'm on holiday. Not that I'm going to get extra things, because I have that interaction with you and the other students. That's what I like. It's helping me, as hopefully I've helped them. It's not just, oh, I know everything and you guys don't know anything and I'm telling you whatever. Is that it's actually helped build up my sort of rapport with students and whatever. Wow. So I hope that came through.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think it motivated us a lot. And so
yes, good. I'm happy.
Yes, I think so. It's important to try motivate your people around you, so you'll be also motivated.
Absolutely. And obviously at the end or whatever, if you wanted me to send you those sort of handouts or whatever, etc., etc., you can pass it on to those students. Yeah, I'm willing to share everything. And even my sort of like email address, if any students want to email me for the college, please do.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think I'll give you my email address later after this webinar.
Sure, that's fine.
I'll share them all the.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I stop sharing the screen now?
Yes, you can stop your share screen. Thank you so much. Okay, so it was the last question, so I'm gonna conclude this webinar, but is it okay for you?
Yes, and if students can show me their faces as we say goodbye, I'd like to see hopefully happy students. Okay, I can see some of them. Bye.
皆様、こちらで本日のウェビナーは終了になります。もしよろしければ最後にちょっとだけカメラの方オンにしていただいて挨拶をしていただけるとジャミル先生もすごく嬉しいみたいです。ただもちろん女性ではない。ありがとうございます。本日のセミナーご清聴いただいてありがとうございます。そうしましたらこちらで終了になりますが、順次ご退出いただいて構いません。またメールの方で資料などご連絡いたしますので、お時間の時にご確認いただけますと幸いです。少しお時間も過ぎてしまいましたが、改めて最後までご清聴いただいてありがとうございます。
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think they're very happy. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Kiari.
Thank you. Sorry, one moment, please. If you don't mind, I'll send you my email address here. Maybe it's better for you.
Okay, in the chat, is it?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Let me get the chat up then.
Okay.
And shall I put mine in there? Okay, I've got that. Let me put mine in there from MPW, my college one. They don't mind me having that. Jamil.Rashid at mpw.ac.uk. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll memo it. And
indeed, no worries. Thank you all.
Okay.
I'll leave you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
And you guys, thank you.
Thank you
I
so
really
much.
enjoyed it. Thank you so
ありがとう
much.
ございます。それではこちらで終了させていただきます。